Perfect. So good evening and morning, everyone, and welcome to the 7th episode of VizConnect, connecting people with the art of data visualization and storytelling. Today, we have Kevin Flerlage with us to share his passion about Tableau. So Kevin is a senior analyst and Tableau developer at Unifund. He has been using Tableau for a year and a half, a Tableau public ambassador and a co-leader of Cincinnati Tableau user group. Only person with 4 top 10 Iron with Peter finishes, and the 4th most favorite author on Tableau Public. He has written several blogs on 2019.2, new features, including one that was published on Tableau website. And the fun fact about him is that he has an identical twin who is a 2-time Tableau Zen master. He has been using Tableau for about 3.5 years, and it's Ken Flerlage. And one more thing about him is that he is responsible for the discovery of arcanine species. That's pretty awesome. So, Kevin, over to you. You can share your screen and we can start.
You guys see my screen okay?
Yes, I can see your screen okay.
All right, wonderful. All right, so yes, today we're going to talk about Tableau 2019.2 new features, and so appreciate you guys having me. It was a great introduction. I probably don't have to say too much more other than I have written about the 2019.2 features. I have a blog post on vector mapping, on parameter actions, and actually, within the next couple of weeks, I'll have one on collapsible containers. So those are the 3 things we'll be talking about today. And actually, one of the blog posts, the vector mapping, that was on Tableau's actually main website. So kind of a proud moment to have that. So I do have a little bit of experience. One of the nice things here at work, I work for a small company, and that's led by Jeff Schaefer, who is a 4-time Zen Master. We're a small company. We move quickly, so we're always on the latest version. So we get a lot of experience. So we're using a lot of the things from 2019.2 in business, and as well as my personal work. So just a little bit about me, and he touched on that just a moment ago. But this is me, and this is my identical twin brother, Ken Flerlage. So I've been using Tableau for about a year and a half. Ken's been using Tableau for about 3.5 years. You can see his T-shirt says Tableau Zen Master, so he is a 2-time Tableau Zen Master. I remember February of 2018, so about a year and a half ago, I started hearing about Tableau a lot at work, and I called Ken up finally and said, hey, it's time for me to learn this. And he sent me a link to Matt Francis, training video that's on Udemy, and I just kind of laughed. I'm like, yeah, I got an identical twin brother that is a 2-time Zen Master. I think that he could teach me how to use Tableau. So anyways, Ken's very well known. He's one of the top ranked folks on the forums. He's the second most favorited author on Tableau Public. He has a really, really well-known website where he really breaks things down easily. It's kenflerlage.com. But he's probably better known for being the identical twin of the Mr. Clean. Hopefully you guys know who Mr. Clean is. So that picture is from the conference, and my gosh, it looks exactly like Mr. Clean. Anyways, all right, today we're going to talk about 2019.2 new features. So the 3 things we're going to talk about are collapsible containers, vector tile mapping, and parameter actions. These are game changers, in my opinion. All 3 of them really open us up to so many different things that were really difficult or impossible to do in previous versions of Tableau. So, all right, let's talk about collapsible containers. So generally what a collapsible container is a floating container that you can open and close. So you kind of see what that looks like on screen, okay? So historically, we could do collapsible containers. I don't know if anybody's done it before, but a gentleman by the name of Robert Rouse, who's a former Zen master and just a technical wizard at Tableau, developed a way to actually create collapsible containers in Tableau. The problem with it is it's hard to maintain, but the bigger problem is you basically had to be a Zen master to be able to do it. It was really a difficult thing to put together. And in my opinion, it was just, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, as we would say. You know, it was harder to, it was put a lot of time and effort in it to do something that, you know, it wasn't maintainable in the end. And then in the end of 2018, I actually wrote about a method when Tableau came out with the dashboard buttons. So my method was duplicate the dashboard, use a button to switch between the two. One of the dashboards would have those extra features like filters or whatever, and would kind of have this seamless feel, but also has its downfalls because you're creating two different views kind of unnecessarily. So the nice thing is now, in 19.2, we can do this right in the software. And for me, it's a complete game changer. So basically how it works is a floating container that you can open and close. And I think a lot of people have this misconception that it's just opening up a container to show filters or parameters or something like that. There are dozens of use cases. And in fact, the blog post I have coming out is called Cases for Collapsible Containers. And I have a dozen different use cases. And I've used almost every single one of them at work so far. Pretty much with every dashboard, I use a collapsing container. So let's jump into Tableau, and we'll show you a few things we can do. So we have just a real simple map here, and we have this sort of sales overview. And I'm going to show you how we would create these collapsing containers. So I'm going to come over here, change this to floating. I can float a horizontal or vertical. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to float this on the dashboard. For now, I'm going to go over to layout and just make the background white so we can see it a little bit better and stretch that. All right, and then I'm going to grab this exceptions. It's just a table, and I'm going to drop it into that window. Let's reduce the size a little bit. All right, so now we have this container with a table in it. Now, if I select this container, come over to and hit this little arrow, there's an option to add show button, okay, or add, or I think, what does it say? I'm sorry. It says, no, I've already done it. So you can add show or hide the container. And when you do that, it adds this little button right here. And I'll show you as I click through it, hit the X button. Hamburger chart. We call this hamburger chart. We hit the hamburger chart. So we have this nice little toggle, okay? So what I typically do is draw a nice little button. So if I hit this little down arrow and hit edit button, I've already drawn a couple of buttons. I do that in PowerPoint and have blog posts about how to draw in PowerPoint. But you have two options. You have an item shown and an item hidden button. So when item hidden would be this little hamburger chart, I'm going to pick a button that shows, and it's a white button, so it's a little hard to see. I'm going to click on the other one. I'm going to pick a close button. If I hit OK, we have this nice little button here. And when I click it, click the exceptions button, it opens this container. When I hit the close button, it closes it. So this really is a great way to save real estate on your dashboards. In the past, I've found myself creating multiple dashboards in a workbook just to have a chart or two. This is a really great way just to kind of show some quick information and do it all in the same dashboard. So a couple of other examples. Here is a visualization created by Daniel Kyoya over in, I believe he's in London. This may not be something you do for work, but it's a really nice design. So he's got three different metrics he's measuring. He's got profit, sales, and quantity. And he has three different ways where he's showing these measures. So he can look at it by category. You're looking at it monthly. You look at it as a table. And what you see when you click these buttons is some really nice visual cues that something's been selected. So category is just gray, then it turns red with an underline. He did the same thing with these buttons here. So click on category. You can really quickly tell when something's selected. So just a really nice design This is my IronViz entry that for the feeder that just ended. I actually ended up getting 4th place on this. So a couple of different things I do in this. So I think most of us have probably done a sheet swap using a parameter. Sheet swaps are made to be about the easiest thing on earth with a collapsible container. So at the top, I do a sheet swap. So basically, there's just a container floating over the top of this chart that has the same chart just adjusted in there. So you can kind of see that sheet swap. And then I also did something a little bit different is I wanted to kind of control the story. I only wanted people to be able to read little pieces at a time. So when the user is done reading, they can hit the continue button to open up a new container. And this whole biz works the same way. As it kind of controls the story by allowing people to read a piece and then continue reading. So in my recent Tableau chart catalog, this is shows 100 different chart types from 74 different authors in the Tableau community. But I used a search function in this. So you can see we click this button and it pulls up a search window. Okay? And one of the greatest uses, in my opinion, is instructions. So if you want to explain to somebody how to use your dashboard, you can build instructions and throw that instruction sheet into a collapsible container. So this is a personal biz I created. I wanted to tell the users how to read it. I just have this button that says how to read. I did a screenshot of my viz, put it into PowerPoint, kind of laid out some arrows and some text, and we have this really easy to follow how to read button. And it's typically, in the past, we may have used a little info icon, but you put something in the tooltip, but that's really limited on what you can or cannot do. So really great way to instruct your users how to read a viz. So that's all I've got to show about the collapsible containers. In my opinion, it completely changes the way we design dashboards, but it really improves the user experience. So before we move on to the next group, or the next piece, do we have any questions about collapsible containers? I don't know if people have an avenue to ask questions, Sagar.
Yep, they can go ahead and ask. So guys, you can go ahead and ask your question in the Q&A tab. So maybe, Kevin, we can take it at the end of the presentation. That will be...
That's fine. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, let's move on. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is vector tile mapping. So you've heard a lot about this. For me, vector tile mapping was sort of a mystery, and I wrote about this. I had no clue what it actually was, but I'll tell you what it is. I spent some time researching it and speaking to my boss, Jeff Schaefer, to kind of understand really what it was. So ultimately, what vector tile mapping comes to is better clarity, improved zooming capabilities, and a lot of different map styles and layers. So let's first talk about what a vector is. And before we do that, let's talk about what a standard image is. So a JPEG or a PNG or any sort of standard image that we're used to using, and forget the mapping side, it uses a pixel to grid methodology. So basically it's kind of points on a grid. Think about photographs you have on your computer. When you zoom in, they get pixelated really quickly. That is using pixel on a grid. And here's an example. So this is just a PNG, and it's a really sharp PNG, but when we zoom in, we'll start to see pixelation. Now, there's not a lot because this is really high quality, but when we get really close to those teeth, you can start to see the pixelation in that image, okay? Now, a scalable vector graphic, or an SVG, really commonly referred to as a vector, uses mathematics rather than the pixel to grid methodology. So it uses lines, points, curves, all that are mathematically produced to draw those images. So when you zoom in, the math does the work for you. It's not pixels on a grid, so you don't lose any clarity whatsoever. So we have this exact same image, and you see when I zoom in, you never lose any quality. There's never any pixelation. It's as clear when you're zoomed in as when you're all the way zoomed out. And that's because the math is actually calculating what those lines look like, okay? All right. You can probably see where we're going with this, but aside from the standard image and vector image piece, it's also key to understand what are map tiles, okay? So map tiles are sort of like a bunch of pieces that fit together like a puzzle. So if I am zoomed in, if I'm looking at the country of India, I may have 20 different tiles that piece together to draw that full map, okay? Now, if I zoom in to a city in India, there's a new set of tiles that are loaded. So they're different, totally different set of tiles. They're going to have different features. They may show roads or city names. And the problem with them is that historically, before 19.2, it used the pixel to grid method. So as we zoom in, we start to have some issues with the quality. And I'm going to show you an example of this. So this is the United States. I'm going to zoom into where I live. And when you zoom in, you'll start to see different things load, but look at the labels. They get giant, and that little dotted line is a river. Look how pixelated that is. And that one gray line going up and down as a highway. I'll show that again. Is you can see the new features load as the new tiles load, but when we get into a certain zoom level, things become really, really ugly. So with the new version, those maps, instead of using the pixel to grid tiles, they use vectors. And this ultimately gives us lots of different abilities, one of the main one being the ability to really seamlessly zoom. So you don't get a choppy zoom for one thing, but you also get a really clean zoom where things don't get pixelated, and you can really dig in deep. There's a limit to where you could go with the previous mapping. There's really no limit now. See, well, we're going to zoom into the same area, and it looks about the same right here, but as we get closer, you're going to start to see how things change. Those labels, city names, don't degrade. You get more information here. You can start to see neighborhoods, and we get really close here. You'll start to see the building layouts, the footprints, sorry. So really, really, really clean. You don't ever see any degradation. And as I'm using the mouse to kind of scroll in here, but it's really smooth as well. So you get a lot of detail, and you just really keep going and keep going and keep going. With the introduction of vector tile mapping, they also introduced new map styles and new map layers as well. So you're used to seeing light and normal and dark, but they also introduced streets, looks kind of like a Google map, outdoors, and satellite. Street and outdoors, for some reason, look pretty similar to each other, but when you get to different zoom levels, they start to really look a lot different. So I'll show those again. So streets, outdoors, and you have satellite maps built right into Tableau. No need to go to Mapbox to create them. Really, really cool that you can do that innate right in Tableau. And then there's also some new map layers. I mentioned building footprints. It's probably my favorite. So this is actually two different maps of where I live. I live in a place called Burlington, Kentucky, which is about 20 minutes south of a big town called Cincinnati, Ohio. So this is just a dark map with the building footprint showing, and this is just a satellite map. It took me 2 seconds to build it. If you're curious, I live in this house right here. I'm going to show one quick example of this. This is a Viz that actually built Tableau reached out to me and said, hey, can you build us a visualization that focuses on the new vector mapping? And this is when I had to start researching it because I had no clue what it was. And to be quite honest, I told them I stink at maps. I'm not very good at them. But I spent some time learning and created a really kind of a cool visualization about a little area down in Cincinnati that used to be really dangerous and now it's blown up and it's really popular, kind of a hip place to go have a drink or hang out. So you click through, you see a variety of maps. Here's a street map. I'm showing the paved roads in this town in red, and we have this Explore, so I can actually zoom in and look at these little shops and restaurants and things really easily. So really cool that you can do these types of things directly in Tableau. All right. So that is collapsible containers. Let's see. All right, we're about 20 minutes in, so we got some time. So that was collapsible containers and vector tile mapping. The last piece I'd like to go over is something called parameter actions. So this is probably the one that got the most hype in 19.2. I use them quite often. I probably use collapsible containers more often, but these really are powerful and can open you up to do some things that honestly you couldn't do in Tableau previously. So parameter actions are similar to other dashboard actions in that you interact with the visualization to make something happen, okay? So what happens when you interact with the visualization, unlike a filter action or a highlight action, is when you interact with a viz, you update a parameter value. And that really opens us up the door to do lots of different things that we couldn't do in the past. So I am going to just get right into this. We're not going to talk too much about it. I'm just going to show you how they work. So if you have problems following, I have a full blog post on my website. It's kevinflerlage.com. It walks through 15 different use cases for parameter actions, and it really gives you in detail how to build them out. And there's a Tableau visualization on my Tableau public site that talks about those as well. So it should be easy to follow. So if you're not following now, certainly check that blog post out. There's lots of other people that have written about it, including my brother as well. He did some kind of more crazy stuff. I'd try to stick to more business use cases. So let's talk about first what a parameter action is, and let's start at the basics, what a parameter is. So we have just this line chart. So it looks pretty good right now, but it's aggregating sales across all subcategories. So let's take a look. What if we want to look at this across subcategories? So if I put subcategory on detail, we get what I like to call spaghetti mess. It's really, really hard to make sense of any of this. If we say change that to color, maybe it's a little bit better. Honestly, I think it's worse. It's really, really difficult to see any information how this is laid out. So what we typically do in this situation, I'm going to change this back to detail. What we typically do in this situation is allow a user to use a parameter to select one of the values. So most of you have probably done this a million times, but I just want to walk through it to make sure everybody's on the same page, and then we'll get into how it works with the parameter actions. So what I'm going to do is just create me a parameter. I'm going to call it VizConnect, just so I've done this presentation several times, so I have about 30 of these parameters in here. Call it VizConnect subcategory parameter. I'm going to make it a string, and I'm going to make it a list value, and I'm going to bring in subcategory. Okay, so I have a subcategory parameter here, and I'm going to show the parameter control. So you can see I now have this drop down, and when I pick something, absolutely nothing happens. And the reason behind that is parameters don't really do anything on their own. You have to actually do something with them. And I would say 99% of the time that means putting a parameter into a calculation. So my goal with this visualization is to highlight one of the lines and kind of dull out all the rest of the lines. So how we're going to do that is create a calculated field. Hopefully you can see what I'm writing here. We're going to say, just call this VizConnect color. All right, so we have subcategory in the visualization. Each one of these lines represents a subcategory. We have subcategory in the parameter. So what we can do is say if my subcategory in the visualization equals the VizConnect subcategory parameter, so when they're equal, then make the line red. Else, make the line gray. End. So pretty simple. It's saying when the two are equal, it's going to give me a value of red. When they're not equal, it's going to give me a value of gray. Let's find this. I'm going to put this on color, and you can kind of see what happens. Let's go into color, edit those colors. Let's turn this one to gray, and I am going to make it almost black. And let's turn this one to red. Now you can kind of see what happens. My color card doesn't usually show here. In case your color card doesn't show, you can always come up to Worksheet, Show Cards, and Reset Cards. I need to show that parameter again. So you have your colors legend here. A little tip, if you weren't aware, all you have to do, if you want to change the order in which these show, you can see that red's kind of behind the gray. You just slide that red to the top, and it'll come to the top, okay? So now we have a nice way to show the different measures using a parameter. So if I pick this parameter, it now changes chairs to red. Accessories turns red. Paper turns red, okay? So we have a nice little selector to allow us to zoom into or to focus on one particular subcategory. Now, I'm not sure I like how thin that red line is, so we can make it thicker. I'm going to duplicate this calculation because I'm going to use the same kind of methodology. I'm going to call this VizConnect size. And instead of turning it red, I'm just going to put a number in here to size it. So let's say if they're equal, let's make it 5. If they're not equal, let's make it 1. We'll drop VizConnect size on size, and you see we have a nice thick line here. So it really calls out the value you're selecting. Okay? So what is a parameter? Parameter action, excuse me. What's parameter action? So parameter action allows us to interact with this visualization to feed a value into this parameter, therefore affecting the calculations that use that parameter. So it's very similar, but instead of actually clicking this drop-down, we're going to interact with the visualization. I should put a disclaimer here. This spaghetti mess example is probably the worst use of a parameter action because selecting this within the visualization doesn't really make sense. It's hard to make sense of what I'm actually selecting. So I don't think this is a really good use case. It's just a really good teaching example. So how we create a parameter action is just like we would create a filter or highlight action. We come up to Dashboard Actions. Just as a note, I'm on a worksheet, so we would go to Worksheet Actions. I'm going to remove that. I am going to add an action called Change Parameter. This is really simple to do. We're going to say Highlight Line. If you were on a dashboard, it would show all your sheets, and you would just select the sheet that you want to interact with, which is this line chart. Since we're on a worksheet, it's the only one showing. And the only really a couple things we need to do. We need to select the target parameter. So that is our VizConnect subcategory parameter. And then we need to tell it the field that we want to feed into that parameter. So we've got just the standard subcategory. We can change this to be set on menu, select, or hover. For this one, I'm going to set it to hover. Now when I click OK, you're going to start to see what happens immediately. As I hover over a line, and you can watch over here, watch that parameter. As I hover over a line, that parameter changes. Okay? So as I select a line, that's feeding that subcategory value into the parameter, and those calculations that use that parameter are highlighting the line and making the line thicker. Okay? So hopefully that's pretty clear in how that's working. So although that's not the greatest use case in the world, there are a lot of different ones. Here's kind of an example that may not be real world, but another really good learning example. In this visualization, I built it to where when you hover over a bar, it actually just shows the label, okay? So there's some tools built into Tableau that allow you to show a label on select, so this may not be that popular or something that you would do, but it allows us to kind of show how these parameters work with dates, and that's one key thing I want to show. So how I have this chart built is built by week of order date and sum of sales. Okay, so you see the weeks down here. What I've done is created a parameter that is called order date parameter. It's a data type of date, and I just allow all values. Since it's a data type of date, we're going to be able to feed any date into this parameter. We don't actually need to make it a list of values. because we're not using that drop-down. We're going to feed something in using the Viz itself. So now when you see, well, I haven't built a parameter action yet, but I'll go ahead and show you that. So we go up to parameters, actions. I've already built this. We have the add label sheet. I want it to affect the order date parameter, which is the one I just showed you. And I want to feed into it the information from this pill, the week of order date, okay? So you can see when I hover over it, if you look at just the parameter, forget the labels for now, you can see as I hover over certain bars associated with certain weeks, that value gets fed into the order date parameter. And then I just created a calculation called label bar chart. Basically, it says if the week of the order date in the visualization equals the week of the order date of the parameter, then show me sales. Otherwise, show me a null value, right? So when I hover, it's showing me the sum of sales. You see I have it aggregated to sum. It's showing me the sum of sales. And all those bars that are not highlighted or not fed into the parameter, it's just showing the null value, okay? Very similar technique here with just a little slider that shows me past and future dates. So it's just feeding a month into that order date parameter, and I'm changing the color whether the month is in the past or whether it's in the future. Okay. This is one that I've had several people tell me that they're using at work already. This is a bar chart with a running sum. I can hover over this bar chart to give me a running sum from a certain point in time. So I know that from October 7th on, we have about $260,000 in sales. So real quick way to get some information on how your running sum looks like from a certain point, not only from the beginning. Or how about a sliding reference line that provides some information? It has a label of the date on the end, has a label of the sum of sales at the top. Maybe a lollipop that provides some additional information. Maybe you're strapped for space on your dashboard. You hover over this line or this category, it shows you the quantity of orders. I think it's, I've got it, oh no, excuse me, sales. All right, one of the cool things you can do, I mentioned sheet swaps with collapsible containers. Personally, I think a sheet swap with two different charts is most easily accomplished with a collapsible container. It takes about 30 seconds to do, where other sheet swaps you have to create parameters and things. We're going to walk through this example really quickly. Just see how we're doing on time. About 35 minutes in, so I've got a little bit. What we do, and there are lots of blog posts on how to do a sheet swap. Basically what you do is you create a parameter that shows the two different values. I've got a scatter plot and an area chart, so I create a parameter with scatter plot and area chart in there. Then you create a calculation that is just equal to that parameter, and then you put it on filter. So for the scatter plot, there's really two values in this parameter, in this calculation using the parameter. And for the scatter plot, I'm just going to check scatter plot. And I'll show you, if I choose area chart, I'm going to leave area chart unchecked. So what happens is area chart's unchecked, it shows nothing. Scatter plot is checked, it shows a scatter plot. So I've got the same way set up for area chart and scatter plot. If that's confusing, there's lots of blog posts. My blog post calls out a really good technique for doing the sheet swap. But why I really want to show this is the fact that parameter actions can interact between multiple data sources. So what I want to do is create buttons. You see here, I've created buttons at the top that allow me to toggle. So if I just pick this from the drop-down, you see the sheet swap happening. But I want these buttons to actually create the sheet swap. So how I can do that is bring in new data sets. So what I've done, and I'll go back to the data source to show this, is just create a new data set called button data. And I've got two values, the same values that are in that parameter, scatter plot and area chart. I've put some XY coordinates in there just to kind of lay them out on screen. It's not really necessary, but so what I've done is bring those X and Y coordinates up here and break this out by shape, by type. So I have a value associated with a scatter plot and a value associated with an area chart. And I've just assigned some kind of custom buttons to that. Now when I bring it to the dashboard, I have these buttons up here using a data source from Excel. These charts down here are using a data source from Superstore data or any other table that you're looking at. I can then go to Dashboard Actions. We are on Dashboard this time, and I'll show you that I'm going to select the buttons. I want to interact with these buttons, so I'm going to only check that sheet. I want it to affect the area or scatter parameter, and I want the field that's feeding into it to be that type that I entered into my Excel spreadsheet. If I set it to hover, I'll put this in presentation mode. All I have to do is hover over these buttons. So the key to this is the fact that you can use parameters and parameter actions across multiple data sources. I use that same general technique to do a background color picker. So Pradeep, I know, is on the line. I actually use Pradeep's background color changing technique that he wrote on Rajiv Pandey's website. But I kind of amped it up with some parameter actions to give you the ability to pick any color you wanted. And this is just me hovering over, generally, a pie chart. Okay, so really cool stuff here. I'm just now quickly going to walk through a bunch of different use cases. Some may be not useful, some may be really useful, but let's just walk through them, and hopefully some things you'll see some things that you can use in your business and your personal business. So we have a bar chart. I can click on that bar chart to break it down to a stack bar chart. I have a scatter plot of all the different subcategories in Superstore data. Let's say if I click on copiers, then it's a drill down. It drills down to the individual products. Okay. You can just drill down to all these different products within these different subcategories. And this one, for some reason, just a simple map takes a little while to load. So I've built this ability to toggle between different levels of detail. So we have a map and showing Texas at 170,000 in sales. If I click on city, it then shows me the city. So Texas still 170,000 in sales, but we can see how these individual cities account for that 170,000. Or this is something I assume that I'm a salesperson and I want to see how I'm comparing to other salespeople. If I hover over this chart here, it actually gives me a breakdown of the difference between the bar I'm selecting and any bar that's larger than this one. This one was a little bit tricky, but really cool function here to show the differences. My boss, Jeff Schaefer, wrote about one of the new features in 2019.2 called Make Line. It's a really easy way to draw lines from one point to another on a map. You can apply parameter actions to affect that as well. Probably not the best use cases because this is actually showing flight information from Cincinnati, and these flights aren't the same across the country. But how about a text highlighter? I don't particularly like using the highlighter in Tableau, so you can create a little text highlighter. Create a text fields, send a parameter action for me to be able to select those different options. One really useful parameter action I've used at work is where we have a bunch of different parameters, maybe they're percentages. When we set these different parameters, you see 150 and 80s. I can create a button to basically send a value of 1 or 100% back to all of those. If I click that, it resets all those parameters. Okay, so those are really cool. Now, there's a bunch of people in the community that have done a bunch of examples as well. And give me just 3 more minutes, and we'll walk through this. I'll walk through them really quickly. This is from Ryan Sleeper, really well-known Tableau Zen master and owner of Playfair Data. He's allowing his users to drill into a chart. So this is a sales by year. Well, I can make it sales by month. You can make it sales by week or sales by day. And this is using that same text kind of highlighting or feature that I used to show the moment ago. Or we have these charts that have all these different categories. It sure be nice to be able to click on the header to sort. Well, you can do that with a parameter action. Really cool. I use this at work. This is really awesome. And I had a bar chart that broke it down into a stack bar chart. This is much better use. You click on this bar chart, and it shows the categories underneath it. So I've got these, the categories at the top, and then I have the subcategories that show below. So hit the category, click on the subcategory, closes it up. Really, really cool. Now my brother, as I mentioned, he likes to do some crazier stuff. Maybe not the typical business use case, but he created a parameter action where you could just hover and it moves where the dot is on screen. And took that one step further and he drew a line, moved the dot and draw a line to it. Okay. Well, then he made a joystick to move the dot. I don't know what his deal with moving dots around on a screen is, but sure there's a use case for it somewhere. And then he just went nuts with it and made an eyeball in Tableau that you could control with this little pad. So pretty crazy, pretty cool stuff. I don't know the business application for that, but pretty darn cool. I decided I wanted to make a match game. So how this is laid out, and actually did this for a Tableau user group, so I've got a little different version. This is what the version looks like on my Tableau public page. I added little labels to here so we could play the game in person. But how this works is there's two cards stacked on top of each other, the back of a card and the front of a card. And what I use is a parameter action. When I click on this, it sends a value in the parameter and tells Tableau how to sort these. Does it start the back of the card first or the face of the card first? I've also got parameter actions to calculate the number of clicks. And then I use some other calculations to tell me if I got a correct match. So if I click this card that changes the sort order, you see a parameter action counts the number of clicks. Click on another card, hey, I got a match. So I show one match, took me 2 clicks to get there. I can start turning over cards and looking for matches, and as I do, it continues to count these clicks. So really fun way to use parameter actions. But probably the coolest thing I've seen anybody do with a parameter action is create the Minesweeper game. So this is from Zen Master Joshua Milligan. He's basically a technical genius. He created Minesweeper right in Tableau using parameter actions. So really, really cool stuff that you can do. I mean, really, the options are endless. All right, so that's all I have for you on the new features for 2019.2. Generally speaking, I think that they're game-changing. Parameter actions allow you to do things you've never done before. The mapping features allow you to get zoom levels and clean, cool-looking maps that you couldn't do without going to Mapbox. And the collapsible containers, collapsible menus, they're really going to change the way we design dashboards and the way users use them. It's really going to change the user experience. So I will send these slides out after the fact, and I do have some sample links in those. I have there in yellow that I have a blog post coming on the cases for collapsible containers with 12 different use cases that should be out in the next couple of weeks. So look for that on my website, kevinflerlage.com. So at this point, I'll open up for questions.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kevin. I think it was some great tips and tricks around parameter action. I'm really sure people are excited about it. So let me just take the first question. Yeah. So the first question is more about collapsible containers. So someone is asking about, is collapsible container just work on floating, or we can do it on tile also?
So it only works on floating containers. So, I mean, you can tile your dashboard all you want, the main pieces of it, and that's how I typically do it. Well, sort of. But the container themselves, if you want them to collapse it, they have to be floating. So typically I would create a main dashboard and float one on top. But when you close it, it's out of the way and you don't see it. But it only works with a floating container. So how I develop dashboards is I float multiple containers onto my dashboard. I don't tile anything because it's hard to use that little layout. I'm not doing it good justice. There's a YouTube video from Curtis Harris that talks about how to build to use tiled and floating containers on a dashboard. Basically what I do is float 2 main containers onto a dashboard and then tile everything within those containers. So using that method, you can basically collapse any of those. So you can have a floating container that is collapsible, but you can build a whole dashboard in that. You can tile within that floating container and build a whole dashboard within that collapsible container, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. I think, Kevin, this is one question I ask every speaker over here. So there are a lot of people who are just starting with Tableau, right? So what would be the maybe 3 advice from your side, what exactly they should concentrate on and how exactly they should build their career from now onwards in Tableau?
If my screen is still shared, I'll pull up a blog post from my brother here, so bear with me. I think it's called 4 Tips for Mastering Tableau. So this is my identical twin brother. He breaks down, this is a great blog post. I refer to so many people to it. It shows 4 tips for mastering Tableau. They're trained, so obviously you need to use the software. I highly recommend the Udemy course from Matt Francis. So that was the course that Ken recommended to me before I told him that he needs to give me a rundown. But about 3 or 4 months into using Tableau, I went through that course and it really filled a lot of gaps. It's awesome. I think it's done in Tableau 9, but man, so much of it applies. It's really an awesome course. So training, obviously going through and understanding how to use the software is key. Practicing, I can't underestimate the importance of practicing. And I would recommend doing it through community projects like Makeover Monday, hosted by Andy Kriebel and Eva Murray. Probably a lot of people on this call are very familiar with that. If you're a little more technical, you can use things like Workout Wednesday. That is, they give you a visualization. You have to recreate it, and there's usually some difficult technical tricks in that. So I would recommend that. And there's a bunch of other community projects like Sports Biz Sunday, Project Health Biz, Throwback Thursday. I would highly recommend competing in Iron Biz. There's a feeder going on right now that if you win, you get to come to the conference in Las Vegas. And there are other projects called Iron Quest. There's lots of different ones that you can practice your skills with. And if you don't want to find your own data set, Makeover Money is great because they provide a data set for you. So really, really cool. I would encourage people to engage in the community. This is something that I think is underestimated. I was lucky enough to be introduced to the community from day one, being brothers with Ken, but engage in the community, learn from others, get on Twitter or LinkedIn and see the things that people are posting, see the conversations that people are having, and get to know people because that's how you learn. I refer to people all the time. I had some server issues the other day, and there were 2 people in the community that I know pretty well just from engaging with those folks in the community. I was able to reach out to them and get the answers I needed. So really, really important to get to know others that are using the software, maybe those that are on the cutting edge, maybe those that are writing blog posts about new features and new tricks and tips. And then I would always recommend that you teach. And I don't mean that you get up in front of a classroom, but I mean that you blog, that you write about your experiences, that you help others. Those types of things allow you to retain the information a lot easier and help you to really understand the information better than you ever would. I've probably grown more in my career when I started blogging and really digging into these different things. And, that's how the parameter actions things, how I got to learn parameter actions so well is I wrote a lot about them. And in doing so, I learned a lot. So that was a little bit of a long-winded answer. I would greatly recommend going to Ken Flerlage's site and look at the Mastering Tableau blog post. It has a ton of information on how to really build your career and understanding of Tableau.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for that. And I think one more question I have with respect to what is the flow with respect to creating a dashboard, right? So do you start directly in Tableau, just creating some mockups, or you sketch before and then going ahead creating something with respect to that in Tableau?
So me, I may be a little different than most, and I kind of go back to my college days. When I was in college and I had to write a 10-page paper, I just pulled up a computer and started typing. I maybe have some notes or something like that, but I just started typing. My rough drafts were all just typed right in on the computer. I didn't write anything up. I didn't create outlines. And how I visualize data is the exact same way. I will typically bring the data into Tableau. I'll start exploring the data. One of my first steps is to understand the fields. I'll oftentimes create tables to do that. A lot of times I'll use the describe function. So if you're not aware, you can just right-click on a dimension or measure and hit describe, and you can see information about that, including values. And then I'll usually just start creating charts. I've heard Andy Kriebel talk about this many times, but I'll just start creating charts, different bar charts, start answering the questions that I have about the data. And then once I kind of have, maybe 8, 10 charts, and I kind of understand which ones make sense and kind of tell the story or help me to understand the story, then I'll start to kind of figure out what my dashboard looks like. I typically don't sketch them. Occasionally I do when I'm trying to really figure out something that's kind of tough, tough way to show data. I did this the other day where I was on a whiteboard and drew 6 different versions of what I might show to kind of talk to my colleagues on the best way to do it. But typically I just start building. I have some sort of idea. I start out with a general template, and I talked about how I float a container for a header, a horizontal container as a header, and then I float a horizontal container as the body. And I kind of have that set up in a certain way. I have that on my Tableau public page. You can see that it's just a template. So, and then I start just kind of dropping charts in there and seeing how it works. It's kind of like writing a paper in a rough draft, and I just see how it works. Generally, I have a kind of a good idea in my head what's going to be on there and how it's going to lay out. But so yeah, I just it's kind of just trial and error to see how it lays out on the dashboard. So nothing mind blowing. I just work better that way versus trying to outline it or break it out or draw it on a piece of paper before doing it in Tableau. I just find it easier to do in Tableau.
Perfect. That's a great advice for everyone who's just starting with it, and I think it makes a lot of sense with respect to that. And I think this is more my personal question about, Kevin, how exactly we should document value out of Tableau, right? Like, are you following any process with respect to it? It's all about I'm creating something in Tableau, but maybe my executive comes and asks me, you know what, I'm spending so much on Tableau. How exactly I should justify that particular question to him? Maybe if you can share your advice or something, scenario if you had with respect to that.
I guess I'm not quite understanding the question. Could you repeat that for me?
So I'm just saying, how exactly do you document value out of Tableau?
Document the value of Tableau.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure I have a great answer for that. I've been using Tableau for a year and a half. I started doing all this, just personal work, putting my visualizations up on Tableau Public, and about 6 months later, got a call from Jeffrey Schaefer, who's I think I mentioned, he's a 4-time Zen master, and he runs a small company, about 100 people, right. And he asked me to come be a Tableau developer for him. So our business is it's not a tech business, but it's very technologically savvy. We have, for 100 people, we have like 20 licenses, Tableau licenses. I mean, there are only 2 main Tableau developers, but a lot of people that use Tableau. So I guess I probably don't have a really great answer because we run our entire business using Tableau. Most of the decisions we make right. are made using some sort of Tableau visualization. And if we're making decisions without it, we're typically developing a dashboard that uses it. So I don't really know how other organizations view it. You know, I'm lucky that the leader of my company is invested in Tableau,
Right.
Enjoys using it and understands the value of it. But as far as, documenting it, it's kind of a known fact here, so it's a little bit tough. But let me just say one thing on a very personal level. It's been incredibly valuable to me. It's changed my career. And one of the great things about Tableau is that the fact that they give the Tableau public product away for free, basically. Sure, you can't save. You have to save to a public server, so it has some limitations. But it's a great way to allow you to learn. And what's better is it puts your resume out in public. So with Tableau, you can go see what somebody can do versus read on a resume and bullet points what they say they can do. So Tableau Public is what changed my career. It's what got somebody to look for me, to hire me, and one of the greats of the Tableau community, Jeff Schaefer, to do so. So just on a personal level, I think the value of Tableau is documented. It's you could probably talk to 1,000 different people that could tell you that they landed their dream job because they were doing great work on Tableau Public. So if you are not doing that, if you don't have a Tableau Public profile, do it. I'm not saying you're not happy in your current position, but get your profile out there for people to see. And I think you'll enjoy following other people and seeing what kind of things they're doing as well. So anyways, just kind of a personal perspective on the value of Tableau.
Perfect. Thank you. And I had just last question for you. And the question is about, so there are various charts in Tableau, right? So how exactly you decide which particular chart to use?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just really matters, it depends. Andy Cotgrave from Tableau would say it depends. It really just depends on what you're trying to show. If I'm trying to show sales figures by state, then I'm probably going to use a bar chart. If I want to show sales over time, I'm probably going to use a line chart. If I'm trying to compare two metrics like, say, sales versus profit, I'm probably going to use a scatter plot. I think that is a learned thing when you study data visualization. You understand what certain chart types apply to certain different data sets. So, the other day I used a box and whisker because I had a bunch of different values broken out by different percentages, and I jittered those within it, and then and it was hard to see with the jitter what the distribution was, so I added a box and whisker. So I really think it just depends on what you're trying to look at, what you're trying to show. So I think that's more of a learned thing. It really just depends. Now, in the Tableau community or Tableau Public, you're going to see a lot of crazy stuff. You're going to see people using lots of curves or drawings. I showed, in fact, let me just pull it up real quick. I showed this visualization. This is, duplicating my data 8 different times and drawing polygons and using trigonometry to figure out this is not something that should be done in business. This is far too hard to understand. In fact, this is a little different version of what I actually published. Showing a bar chart is probably the best way of doing it. So I would be careful, not trying to do something that doesn't apply to the data. It's key that you're able to allow the user to, people say they should understand the data in 3 seconds. I don't necessarily buy that. I think people need to be able to understand the data, and if they explore it, it may take longer than 3 seconds. But I always trying to find the best chart for the data. Using a radio chart, typically is not the best way to show data. It might be fun to do in my personal work, but not typically the best way. So yeah, I mean, one thing I'll kind of plug is recently I developed the Tableau chart catalog. I mentioned that earlier. It has 100 different chart types from a bunch of different authors in the Tableau space. That's a really good inspiration to take you kind of beyond the Show Me panel in Tableau and kind of see what other options are available. A lot of them have only a few use cases, but most of them have some use case. So Sankey diagrams, for example, are probably used too often, but they have some really great use cases. One of the ones that Jeff talks about and my brother who works in higher education talks about is how people move from one major to another. So there's definitely good use cases for all these different charts. Just be careful. So we looked at and I'm being a little long-winded, we looked at our charts on our Tableau server, and I think about 30% of them were bar charts, another 15% were line charts, another 10% were maps. So about 50% of our charts were bar charts, lines, and maps. So, you know, there's a good percentage of the time you can get it done with those types of charts. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay. Yes. So perfect. Thanks a lot, Kevin. I think it was a great session. Thank you for coming and presenting in VizConnect. I hope it is valuable for everyone and people are taking something from this particular session. So I think I have just one ask from everyone. We are a data company and we love your feedback. I have just posted a Google form for your feedback. Just let us know what you want from these sessions and we'll try our best to get it for you. So thank you. Have a great weekend ahead. And last but not least, Kevin, thank you. I appreciate the effort, just taking your time in presenting in VizConnect and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys, for having me. Thank you.